I had a baby. If you missed my last update video, I got diagnosed with gestational hypertension and had to get induced at 37 weeks. So I found out 4 days before I was going to need to be induced. And it was really hard because I worked really hard on researching and I don't want to say training, but really practicing things like hypnobirthing. And I just really wanted to have a natural, unmedicated birth just for personal reasons. But I dedicated a lot of time to trying to make that happen. Spoiler, it didn't happen, but that's okay because he's here, he's safe, and everything worked out. So I got induced on a Monday, 7:30 a.m. I was at the hospital. The plan was to get checked, probably do side detect, and then eventually start Pitocin. So the doctor came and checked me first thing, and I was completely closed, not dilated at all, which was no surprise, and I think like barely effaced at all. So we were starting from zero. I fully expected it to be a 3-day process. So from there, they started giving me the side detect. I had 2 pills that dissolved in my cheeks every 4 hours, I think like 4 to 6 hours. So we basically did that all day Monday and all through the night, and I didn't start really feeling anything. I think Monday night I started feeling a little crampy, and then it wasn't until Tuesday morning about 2 a.m. is when I started feeling contractions. They were very mild though, nothing crazy. I got checked in the morning, and I got checked in the morning by my night nurse, and she gave me this look and she was like, I think you're like 5-6 centimeters. And I was like, wow, okay, that's awesome. I'm smashing this. And so she gets the doctor comes in, he's like, well, let's break your water, let's just get to it. And she actually, my night nurse had another nurse come in just to verify, and she said the same thing, like 5-6 centimeters. Doctor comes in, checks, and he says no, she's like 1, maybe 1.5, and like barely effaced. So I don't know what happened there, and then he was like, but I did just break your water without meaning to. So that was kind of disappointing because I was kind of banking on like laboring on my water. I mean, I don't know if it would help with pain, but people say, you know, if your water is still intact, you get a little bit of relief from that with the contractions. But anyway, so, and it wasn't a big gush of water or anything. I think it just slowly trickled out all day, so that was kind of surprising. I was expecting it to be like this big gush, but that happened. That was disappointing. And then he said, let's just start the Pitocin. I think I had Jimmy run down and get me a bagel because once I started Pitocin, I was gonna be on clears. So, but I started getting nauseous at this point anyway, and I was like, I think I took like 2 bites of the bagel. Contractions started ramping up once we started the Pitocin. I was doing all the tricks, everything I learned. I got in the shower at one point. I did my combs. We tried the TENS machine. I hated that. Jimmy hooked it up for me, and I was like on my knees over the ball, kind of rocking, and he turned it on, and it was on my lower back, and I swear it shocked me into my knees. I was like, get this off of me. So TENS was a bust. Jimmy gave me counter pressure on every contraction. He was such a trooper with that. And then at about 3 p.m., they slowly were upping the Pitocin. At about 3 p.m., all of a sudden I was like, I cannot take this anymore. The contraction, I was only getting about 30 seconds in between. They had checked me at this point, and I was still only 3 centimeters dilated. I wasn't making progress. They had checked me a couple hours before and I was 3, so I had made no progress, even though I was just in excruciating pain at this point. Like I said, I was coping completely fine, and then all of a sudden I just could not. The main thing was during the contractions I couldn't catch my breath. I couldn't breathe through them anymore, and so I said, okay, game over. So Jimmy made the call. Luckily, we are anesthetists at this hospital, so he called the doctor who had the trauma phone, and he came up immediately, got my epidural in within like 2 minutes. It was awesome. I got my epidural, and then it slowly started kicking in. The contractions got less and less intense, and then it was to the point where I could still kind of move my legs a little bit, but I wasn't feeling contractions. So they kept upping the Pitocin. That was like 3:30, and then they checked me again at 7, and I was only at like a 4 or 5 centimeters dilated, which made me feel better because I was like, okay, it was worth it to get the epidural, because I was afraid I was gonna get the epidural and then all of a sudden be fully dilated, and that would have been very frustrating for me. But no, I was not. I was still making very, very slow progress. At this point too, they were turning me a lot. Baby wasn't loving all the positions I was in, which was one of the reasons I was freaked out with epidural. The baby's heart rate wasn't loving some of the positions I was in. Finally got into like a good happy medium, and then I don't know if it was them still upping the Pitocin or what, but I started feeling the contractions again really strong through the epidural, and I was kind of coping with it for a little bit. And then Jimmy had gone down to get a drink or something and ran into the OB CRNA, and she's like, oh, I'll just come up and give her a little lidocaine bolus. So they gave me a little bolus through the epidural, felt great. And then that was at like 7:30 p.m. I think, and then around 10 p.m. my nurse came in and was like, how you doing? And we were like kind of just napping on and off at this point, and I was awake, and I was like, I don't know, my hips really hurt. Like I started getting bad pain in my hips, and it wasn't pressure, because she said, let me know if you feel like you have to poop or you feel pressure in your butt, because that's usually what people will feel even with the epidural when it's time to push. But I didn't feel that. I just had really bad pain in my hips. And she was like, well, that could be a sign, so let me check you. And she checked me and she was like, yeah, baby's like this far from coming out. So I was like, oh my gosh, it's go time. She got another nurse in. We did a couple practice pushes, and then she was like, let's get the doctor because you're moving this baby with each push. The doctor comes in and he's gets his gown on and everything. And then the nurse comes in and is like, hey, this baby just delivered next door. We need you next door. So he's like, okay, just don't push. He takes the gown off, goes next door, and then they get another doctor to come in. So we get another doctor, she comes in, we start pushing again. I told Jimmy at this point, I was like, there was just some weird Smithsonian thing on TV. I was like, hey, will you turn the TV off and put some music on? So we had like Empire of the Sun radio going. Pushing was a little scary because baby wasn't liking the pushing. His heart rate was going down while I was pushing. I don't know if it was between contractions or while I was pushing. I could hear it going down and it was a little bit stressful. They put oxygen on me at one point, and then the doctor said something about we might need to get the vacuum, and so that part was really scary. I think just because I know too much being medical, so I was like, we need this baby out now. So I was just pushing literally all my might, and it was crazy. When I was having a contraction, I could feel him coming, like moving himself. So I knew we could do it. We were close. I just gave a really good push, and I felt, I could feel him coming out. That was the cool thing about my epidural too. I don't know if they had turned it off at a good point or what, but I was able to feel. I could feel everything that was going on. It wasn't painful, but I could feel, which was nice because I could kind of use that to guide my pushing. All of a sudden, they were like heads out, and then I could feel the doctor kind of helped guide the body out after that on the next push, and he was born at 10:47 p.m. They put him on my chest right away, and he just did like a couple little cries. I could tell he was pretty blue. He did a couple little cries. I got to talk to him for a second, and then the baby nurse was like, hey, are you okay if I take him? I was like, yeah, please. So took him over. They did like some deep suctioning. Jimmy went over and got to be with him during that. And then after a couple minutes, he was fine. I think his APGARs were like 8 and 9. So he was fine. They brought him back to me, and we got to do a little golden hour, and he's absolutely perfect. And that's Jackson's birth story.